Hello, welcome to the Celebrity Crime File. Today, we're peeling back the curtain on a woman who's been called the right hand to one of music's most powerful and now most controversial men, Sean Diddy Combs.
And that right hand? It's Christina K.K. Karorum, a name that's popped up all throughout the criminal and civil allegations. We're talking racketeering, sex trafficking, witness tampering, and her name is all over it.
The crazy part is, she hasn't testified yet, but her presence is everywhere in this case. Witness after witness, lawsuit after lawsuit, her name keeps coming up. If you follow the paper trail, she's like a human thread through the entire operation.
And it's not just the prosecution bringing her up. Even in the media, she's been compared to Ghislaine Maxwell, the woman who assisted Jeffrey Epstein. Some say KK played the same role in Diddy's alleged enterprise.
It's a wild comparison, but when you look at the civil suits, there's one where she allegedly threatened to ship a victim off, where she'd never see her family again. That sounds more like something out of a cartel movie than a music company.
And let's not forget that disturbing allegation where KK supposedly injected an IUD into a victim. That's medical level control. And that's coming from a civil filing, not a conspiracy blog.
What stands out is that she wasn't just some assistant. She was Diddy's chief of staff. According to court testimony, she ran his office, gave orders, cleaned up messes, sometimes literally.
Right. In fact, one former employee said she made him clean hotel rooms after Diddy's sex parties. And not just once. He said it was part of the job, as if covering up after trauma was business as usual.
You also have George Caplan, who testified that he answered directly to KK. She was his boss. He said she was the one who told him to prepare hotel rooms. That's key, because prosecutors are treating those rooms as crime scenes.
So if those rooms were being used for coerced sex acts, and she was organizing the space, giving orders, that places her right in the chain of responsibility. It's not just association, it's participation.
And it raises the question, if she was so involved, why hasn't she been charged? Is she cooperating with prosecutors? Is she going to flip on Diddy?
Some legal analysts think exactly that. They say she hasn't been charged because she's already struck a deal, that she's being held as a potential witness, maybe even a rebuttal witness, ready to destroy any false defense from Diddy's side.
What's interesting is how Diddy himself spoke about her. Back in 2021, he made a Facebook post praising KK, saying she keeps everything in my life and business running. That's not someone in the background. That's Command Central.
And yet, in her public statement, KK denies everything. She said she's been falsely accused, that she never condoned abuse, never drugged anyone, and never participated in any assault. She called the allegations unthinkable.
But the court doesn't just look at denials. It looks at behavior, evidence, relationships, and KK has been named in so many testimonies already, from employees to alleged victims to even Cassie herself.
It's telling that both sides, prosecution and defense, are treating her like a live wire. If she takes the stand, either side could try to use her, and either side could be blown up by what she says.
And the fact that Homeland Security seized her phone, that could be the bombshell waiting to drop. Because if that device has texts, voice memos, location data, she might not even need to speak. The phone could speak for her.
We've seen it before. You don't need a confession when the metadata tells the whole story. Timeline, contact chains, photos, that's enough to sink someone or clear them.
So right now, KK is in this strange limbo. She's a ghost in the courtroom, mentioned by everyone but not yet seen. And that makes her possibly the most dangerous person in this entire trial.
Not because of what she's done, but because of what she knows. If she talks, really talks, she could either exonerate Diddy or finish him.
So we've established that KK was a central figure. But what's even more disturbing is the picture witnesses are painting of life around Diddy. It wasn't just fast-paced. It was controlled, obsessive, and in some cases, downright frightening.
That's the word people keep using, control. We've heard multiple witnesses say that everything around Diddy was scheduled, monitored, and weaponized if necessary. You don't say no to the man, and if you do, there are consequences.
One of the most telling moments came from Capricorn Clark, who said that Diddy once told her he likes guns and doesn't do back and forth. That wasn't said on a song or in a movie. That was in an elevator, in front of a witness.
It was during a conversation about 50 Cent, right? And that quote, "I like guns," was directed at Chris Lighty, who managed both Diddy and 50 Cent at the time. That's not beef, that's a threat.
And it tracks with other testimonies. People didn't just say Diddy was demanding, they said they feared him. Not metaphorically. They said he had the power to ruin their careers, reputations, even lives.
There was one former employee who said that when you worked for Diddy, sleep was optional. He said he got 4 hours a night max. Sometimes he'd work 20 hours straight and still be expected to go clubbing afterward.
That doesn't just sound exhausting, it sounds like coercion, especially when you hear that many of these people didn't feel like they could leave, that they believed walking away meant being blacklisted from the industry.
That brings us to George Kaplan again. He testified that he worked insane hours, answered directly to KK, and saw more than he ever wanted to see. But the part that stuck out, he said he respected Diddy, even admired him.
And that's how psychological control works. You break people down, make them dependent, then reward them just enough to keep them loyal. That's not mentorship. That's manipulation.
Witnesses described a world where appearances were everything, where you smiled for the camera, then cleaned up the mess behind the scenes, often literally. One employee said he had to remove sex toys from hotel rooms. That was part of the job.
And it all loops back to image. Diddy has always been about brand, whether it's fashion, fragrance, or music. But what we're seeing in this trial is that protecting the brand came at a human cost. At least that's what these testimonies claim.
You know what's chilling? Some employees said that violence wasn't just threatened, it was expected. They spoke about beatdowns, intimidation, rooms locked from the outside. That's way past celebrity tantrum territory.
And in every story, there's this echo of fear, not just of Diddy, but of what happens if you cross him. That kind of influence is more than fame. That's power backed by fear.
You look at how many people stayed silent for so long. That tells you everything. It wasn't just about NDAs or contracts. It was about survival. People believed they had no choice.
Even Cassie, in her civil suit, said it took her years to speak because she felt trapped, emotionally, professionally, physically. She described being monitored, drugged, and assaulted over and over again.
And she's not alone. Multiple lawsuits mention the same pattern: excessive control, emotional manipulation, physical threats, and handlers like KK who made it all run like clockwork.
Which leads to a bigger question. Was this chaos or was it organized? Because prosecutors seem to be framing it as a machine, one built on abuse, secrecy, and fear, with everyone playing a part.
That's why RICO is on the table. Racketeering charges aren't just about one bad act, they're about organized behavior, a system designed to exploit people, especially women, in a calculated way.
And when multiple witnesses, from victims to staff, repeat the same structure, the same routines, the same pressure, that's not coincidence. That's evidence.
And that's why this trial is being watched so closely. It's not just about what Diddy did. It's about how many people were involved and how long the silence lasted.
One thing that keeps coming up in this trial is the culture of silence. People around Diddy didn't just stay quiet. They felt like they had to. It was like speaking out was more dangerous than staying in.
Exactly. And when you listen to the testimonies, it's not just fear of losing a job. It's fear of losing everything: their careers, their safety, even their mental health. That's the level of control being described.
There's that moment where a witness said Diddy once warned her, "If anything ever happened, I'd have to kill you." It sounds shocking, but what's more shocking is how many people just took that kind of talk as normal.
And it wasn't always said out loud. Sometimes it was just understood. Like when George Kaplan said he didn't know exactly what he was helping cover up, he just knew not to ask. That silence was part of survival.
We heard from witnesses who said they were coached on what to say, told to lie, and warned about talking to outsiders. Some even signed NDAs under pressure. That's a legal tool, but in these cases, it felt more like a muzzle.
One woman said that when she considered going to the police, she was told by KK that she'd never see her family again. That kind of language isn't corporate. That's intimidation at a whole other level.
And what's wild is how many people still felt some kind of loyalty. Even after years of alleged abuse, some witnesses talked about Diddy with admiration, calling him a genius, saying he inspired them.
That's the complicated part. People were abused, but also elevated. He gave them opportunities, put them in rooms they never imagined, and then, according to these stories, used that power to control them.
And that control wasn't just emotional, it was logistical. Phones were taken, locations tracked, movement restricted. Some witnesses described being followed or monitored 24/7.
That aligns with what Cassie said in her lawsuit, that she wasn't just abused physically, but psychologically, that she was isolated from her support system, made to depend on Diddy entirely.
And again, KK's name comes up. She's described as the one giving orders, facilitating these movements, handling logistics. If Diddy was the architect, KK was the builder.
What's scary is how normal it all became. One witness said it wasn't shocking anymore to see young women crying, being pulled into rooms, disappearing for hours. It just became part of the environment.
And the people who didn't want to participate, they were phased out. Or worse, humiliated publicly, demoted, or made to feel useless. That kind of psychological warfare is hard to prove, but multiple people are describing the exact same tactics.
The consistency is what matters here. When so many stories match, down to the tone of voice, the phrases used, the timelines, is hard to ignore.
And let's not forget the drugs. Witnesses say drugs were everywhere. Used for partying, yes, but also allegedly for control, to sedate, to manipulate, to keep people disoriented.
And that's where it crosses into serious criminal territory. It's not just sex, not just emotional harm. If people were being drugged without consent or coerced into it, that's assault.
And what we're seeing is a system where abuse wasn't a one-off. It was layered. There was glamour on the outside, but behind the scenes, there was pain, fear, and silence.
And now, the silence is breaking, one testimony at a time, one lawsuit at a time. And the question is, how much truth is enough to bring it all crashing down?
As the trial rolls on, it's not just what's happening inside the courtroom that matters, it's what's happening outside. The media is locked in, and every leak, every update spreads instantly.
Yeah, and in some ways, the court of public opinion is moving faster than the actual trial. Social media, blogs, podcasts, everyone has an opinion. And for someone like Diddy, who built a brand on being untouchable, that's a huge shift.
The power of that perception can't be overstated. A lot of people believed Diddy was beyond consequences, and suddenly he's in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. The public is watching with a new lens now.
And the pressure on the legal teams is massive. The defense is trying to paint all these testimonies as unreliable, using inconsistencies, time gaps, even emotional behavior as evidence that these witnesses can't be trusted.
But at the same time, the prosecution is stacking patterns. They're not depending on just one voice. They've got multiple people with similar stories spanning over a decade. That builds credibility, especially with a jury.
It's also worth noting that some high-profile witnesses were dropped. The government chose not to bring in every name listed. That tells me they feel confident. They believe they already have what they need.
That strategy is clean and focused. If you over-explain or overwhelm, you lose the jury. But if you show structure, timeline, and routine, that's how racketeering charges stick.
And don't forget the RICO charge. People think that's just for mafia cases, but it's perfect for this kind of operation. You don't need Diddy to have done everything himself. You just need to prove he led the enterprise.
Exactly. If KK gave the orders, if security enforced them, and if others recruited or intimidated victims, but it all led back to Diddy, then legally, he's responsible for the system.
Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, it's a PR disaster. Every past allegation, every old rumor is being pulled back up. People are watching old videos with new eyes, analyzing his words, his behavior, his past interviews.
It's like everything is retroactively suspicious now. That's the thing with image. When you fall from grace, everything you've ever done gets reevaluated under a microscope.
And 50 Cent is fueling that fire. He's using every development to taunt Diddy online, with memes, fake trailers, even mock movie posters. It's part trolling, part branding, and part performance art at this point.
What makes it so powerful is that people are listening. He's not just throwing jokes into the void. His audience is huge, and every joke carries a message. Diddy isn't above this. He can fall.
But the legal defense knows that public perception can't determine a verdict. That's why they're laser focused on the technical side, discrediting witnesses, questioning memory, and stressing lack of physical evidence.
The only problem with that strategy is how many witnesses are emotionally compelling. When someone breaks down on the stand, the jury feels that. You can't always cross-examine trauma out of someone.
And that's where this trial becomes more than legal. It becomes human. These stories, if true, aren't just crimes. They're life-altering experiences that people carried silently for years.
And now, they're all being poured out in the same courtroom, one by one, page by page, voice by voice. That accumulation may be the most dangerous thing Diddy has ever faced.
Because this time, it's not just one person coming forward. It's a wave. And the longer the trial goes on, the more people are watching and remembering.
So here we are, a global superstar, once seen as untouchable, now fighting for his legacy and possibly his freedom. This isn't just a legal battle, it's the potential collapse of the entire Diddy brand.
And the fallout is already showing. Partnerships are pulling back. Brands are distancing themselves. His name isn't just in courtrooms, it's being pulled out of deals, award shows, even playlists.
That's what happens when you've been more than just an artist, when your name is a business. The moment trust is gone, the entire structure starts to shake. Investors, collaborators, fans, they all start walking away.
And while all that happens, 50 Cent is still in the background, watching, mocking, reacting. But he's also doing more than trolling now. He's positioning himself as someone who called it early, who tried to warn everyone.
Some might say it's opportunistic, others would say it's vindication. Either way, 50's voice has been part of this story from the beginning, and it looks like he'll be there until the end.
What fascinates me is how many people are now coming forward, people who were silent for years. Former employees, assistants, even publicists, suddenly saying, yeah, we saw it too. That adds weight.
It's a snowball effect. One person speaks, and it makes it safer for the next. That's how culture shifts. The people who felt powerless before are realizing they're not alone anymore.
And while all that happens, 50 Cent is still in the background, watching, mocking, reacting. But he's also doing more than trolling now. He's positioning himself as someone who called it early, who tried to warn everyone.
Some might say it's opportunistic. Others would say it's vindication. Either way, 50's voice has been part of this story from the beginning, and it looks like he'll be there until the end.
What fascinates me is how many people are now coming forward, people who were silent for years. Former employees, assistants, even publicists, suddenly saying, yeah, we saw it too. That adds weight.
It's a snowball effect. One person speaks, and it makes it safer for the next. That's how culture shifts. The people who felt powerless before are realizing they're not alone anymore.
And you can't ignore the ripple effect across the industry. Other executives, other stars, people are starting to ask how many other powerful figures had teams like KK or routines like these. This case is opening more eyes than just the jury's.
But legally, this all comes down to what can be proven, not what's believed. The jury has to weigh facts, not feelings. And Diddy's lawyers are counting on that distinction.
They're banking on doubt, on the idea that memories fade, motives get blurry, timelines don't line up. They don't have to make Diddy look innocent, just uncertain enough.
But with RICO, uncertainty can be dangerous for the defense, because the law doesn't require a single smoking gun. It just needs a pattern, a consistent system of exploitation.
And when witnesses name the same rooms, the same handlers, the same routines, that becomes a net. And right now, Diddy is at the center of it.
What's interesting is how quiet Diddy has become during the trial. No public statements, no interviews, just silence. For someone who built a career on controlling his image, that silence is deafening.
It may be strategic, or it may be fear, because anything he says can and will be picked apart. And in this digital age, silence isn't neutral, it's noticeable.
So what are we really witnessing? The fall of a mogul? The exposure of an empire? Or just the latest chapter in a long story of fame, power, and consequences?
Maybe all of the above. Maybe none of it. That's what makes this trial so captivating. It's not just about guilt or innocence. It's about what happens when the lights come on behind the curtain.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into one of the most high-profile trials in entertainment history. This has been Celebrity Crime File.
Stay curious, stay alert, and we'll see you next time. Same place, same spotlight.